The courtroom was so silent it felt suffocating. All eyes were on the small boy in the witness stand, Ethan Carter. 8 years old. Thin, pale, silent. But his silence wasn't just quiet, it was heavy, like it carried the weight of something unspeakable. Sitting beside him was Max, a golden Labrador, his service dog. Ethan's small fingers clung to the dog's fur as if letting go would make him disappear. Judge Alistair Monroe adjusted his glasses. His voice was firm but kind. "Son, can you tell us what happened that night?" Ethan didn't respond. He just stared at the polished wooden desk in front of him. The defense attorney, Richard Calloway, let out a slow, deliberate sigh. A smirk played on his lips as he turned to the jury. "Ladies and gentlemen, this child has not spoken in months. Without his words, there is no case." His client, Gregory Holt, sat with his arms folded. A respected businessman. Powerful. Untouchable. Accused of a crime so vile, the entire courtroom felt uneasy. Ms. Lillian Brooks, Ethan's court-appointed advocate, took a careful step toward the boy. Her voice was gentle but urgent. "Ethan, I know speaking is hard for you, but you don't have to use words. You can tell us with Max." A flicker of recognition passed through Ethan's eyes. Ms. Brooks took a deep breath. "Ethan, sweetheart, if Gregory Holt hurt you, touch Max's ear." For a moment, nothing happened. The courtroom was frozen in anticipation. Then, with an almost imperceptible movement, Ethan's fingers brushed against Max's ear. The dog's reaction was instant. Max stood up so fast his nails scraped against the floor. His lips curled back, and he let out a deep, guttural growl, a sound filled with rage. The tension in the room snapped like a frayed wire. The judge leaned forward, his face unreadable. "Ms. Brooks, what is happening?" Ms. Brooks turned, her face pale but determined. "Your Honor." Ethan just gave his testimony. The courtroom erupted in gasps, and Gregory Holt's smirk? It was gone. For the first time since the trial began, Gregory Holt shifted in his seat. His cold, arrogant smirk was gone. Instead, his fingers tightened around the armrests of his chair as the growl of Max echoed through the courtroom. The jury exchanged uneasy glances. The judge tapped his gavel lightly, but even he seemed shaken. "Order," he muttered, though his voice lacked its usual authority. His eyes remained locked on Ethan. The boy hadn't spoken, but the message was clear. The defense attorney, Richard Calloway, forced out a chuckle, shaking his head as if the whole thing was a joke. "Your Honor, with all due respect, are we really entertaining this? A dog growling is not evidence. This is nothing but coincidence." Ms. Brooks' voice was steel. "Max is a trained service animal, Mr. Calloway. He doesn't growl without reason." The judge exhaled. "Ms. Brooks, are you suggesting that this boy, who refuses to speak, is communicating through his dog?" "I'm not suggesting it," she said firmly. "I'm proving it." She turned back to Ethan, her eyes softening. "Sweetheart, I know this is hard, but I need you to help us understand. Can you answer another question?" Ethan's fingers tightened in Max's fur. Then, almost imperceptibly, he gave the smallest nod. The courtroom held its breath. Ms. Brooks swallowed. "Ethan, if Gregory Holt hurt your mom that night, touch Max's paw." For a long, agonizing second, Ethan didn't move. Then, slowly, his small hand reached down and touched Max's front paw. The dog's reaction was immediate. He let out a sharp, furious bark that made everyone in the courtroom jump, even Judge Monroe. But what happened next sent ice down everyone's spine, because as soon as Max barked, Ethan flinched violently, his entire body jerked as if expecting to be hit. The courtroom froze. Ms. Brooks inhaled sharply. Several jury members covered their mouths. But it was Gregory Holt's reaction that changed everything. His fingers twitched. His jaw clenched. And for just a fraction of a second, a flicker of something dangerous and dark passed through his eyes, something that screamed guilt. The judge saw it. The jury saw it. And for the first time since this trial began, it wasn't Ethan who looked afraid. It was Gregory Holt. For the first time in the entire trial, Gregory Holt looked afraid. It was subtle, just a twitch of his jaw. A tightening of his fingers against the armrest. But in a courtroom where everyone was watching, that flicker of fear was as loud as a confession. Ms. Brooks didn't miss it. Neither did the jury. Judge Monroe shifted in his seat. His eyes flicked to Ethan, who was now hugging Max tightly, his small frame trembling. The boy's reaction was enough to make the courtroom feel colder. Max had barked. Ethan had flinched. And now, the weight of that moment hung in the air like a guillotine waiting to drop. The defense attorney, Richard Calloway, forced a laugh. "Your Honor, come on. Are we really going to let the reaction of a child's pet sway a trial? This is ridiculous." Ms. Brooks turned to him, her expression icy and sharp as glass. Max isn't just a pet. He's a trained service dog. His responses aren't random, they're conditioned. Ethan has been using Max to tell us what he can't say out loud. Judge Monroe exhaled heavily, rubbing his temple. I'll admit this is highly unusual. But the child's reaction just now was not an accident. Ms. Brooks finished. She turned back to Ethan, kneeling beside him. Sweetheart, I know this is scary, but you're safe here. Max will protect you. Ethan's small fingers buried deeper into the dog's fur. His breathing was uneven, as if something inside him was trying to claw its way out. Ms. Brooks hesitated, then took a risk. Ethan, she said softly, did Gregory Holt come into your house that night? A single, small nod. The air in the courtroom shifted. Somewhere in the jury box, someone whispered, "Oh my God." Ms. Brooks' voice remained steady. Did he hurt your mother? Ethan's entire body tensed. His lips parted slightly, just barely, like he wanted to speak, but something inside him wouldn't let him. Instead, he lifted his trembling fingers and touched Max's tail. The dog snapped upright, his ears flattening, his body going rigid. Then, with a deep, low growl, Max bared his teeth. It was not an ordinary growl. It was the sound of pure, unfiltered rage. Judge Monroe leaned forward. Gregory Holt stiffened. And then, for the first time in months, Ethan finally spoke. His voice was barely above a whisper, but it silenced the entire courtroom. He heard her. The words were small, fragile, like they might shatter if spoken too loudly. But the moment they left his lips, the reaction was immediate. A woman in the gallery gasped. Someone from the jury muttered a curse under their breath, and Gregory Holt, his face turned white as a sheet. The boy had finally spoken, and now there was no escaping the truth. For a few seconds, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Ethan's words, small, fragile, and trembling, had just detonated in the courtroom like a bomb. He heard her. The sound of them still lingered in the air, bouncing off the walls, seeping into every person present. Then, chaos, gasps, murmurs, shock. Judge Monroe lifted a hand. Order. Order in the courtroom. His gavel slammed down, but the tension in the air refused to settle. Gregory Holt, the untouchable businessman, the man with power and connections, was suddenly looking like a trapped animal. His hands clenched, his eyes darting from face to face, calculating. Ethan, still gripping Max like a lifeline, looked terrified. His body had gone rigid, his breathing shallow, his small fingers twisting into the dog's fur. But it was too late to take it back. He had spoken. And the world had heard. The prosecutor, sensing the shift in power, stood up. Your Honor, I request an immediate recess to. This is absurd. The defense attorney, Richard Calloway, cut in sharply, his voice almost frantic. This is a child who hasn't spoken in months. How do we even know he understands what he just said? Ms. Brooks stepped forward, her eyes burning with fury. He understands perfectly. And you know it. Judge Monroe exhaled, rubbing his forehead. Enough, he muttered. His eyes turned back to Ethan, but something was wrong. The boy looked like he couldn't breathe. His chest rose and fell too fast, his fingers gripping Max so tightly his knuckles turned white. His face had lost all color, his lips trembling as though he was remembering something. Something terrible. Ethan? Ms. Brooks crouched beside him, concern etching deep into her face. Sweetheart, it's okay. You're safe. Ethan's lips parted slightly, but no words came out. Then, slowly, his gaze lifted. But he wasn't looking at Ms. Brooks. He wasn't looking at the judge. He was looking straight at Gregory Holt. And in his wide, terrified eyes, there was something unmistakable. Recognition, fear, and worst of all, memory. Gregory Holt knew it too. For a single heartbeat, his mask cracked, and Ethan saw it. Something inside the boy broke. A strangled sound left his throat, and suddenly, he threw himself off the chair. The courtroom erupted in panic as Ethan scrambled backward, pressing himself against the witness stand like he was trying to disappear. Max barked wildly, standing between Ethan and Holt, his teeth bared. Ethan was shaking violently now, his breath coming in sharp, erratic gasps. His entire body was curled into itself, his arms wrapping around his knees, rocking back and forth. Then, in a voice so small, so broken, it barely reached the microphone, he whispered, "Please don't let him take me." The words sent a chill through every person in the room, because this trial was never just about his mother. It was about him. And suddenly, everyone realized what Ethan had been too afraid to say. Gregory Holt hadn't just hurt his mother. He had come for Ethan, too. The silence after Ethan's whisper was thick, suffocating, deadly. Please don't let him take me." The words hung in the air, heavy like a storm cloud about to burst. And then, everything snapped. Max lunged forward, barking so viciously that the armed court officers instinctively reached for their holsters. The judge slammed his gavel. "Order! Order in the courtroom." But no one was listening. Ethan was shaking violently, his small body pressed against the wooden witness stand as if he could disappear into it. His chest rose and fell too fast, his fingers curled into his arms, his breath coming in choked gasps. "Get him out of here," Gregory Holt suddenly barked, rising to his feet. His voice had changed. No longer smooth, no longer composed. It was sharp, commanding, angry, and for the first time, everyone saw it. The mask was slipping. This wasn't a wrongfully accused businessman. This was a predator caught in the light. Ms. Brooks stood between Holt and Ethan, her body stiff, protective. "Sit down, Mr. Holt." Holt's eyes flashed with something dangerous. "You're traumatizing this child with this nonsense. He doesn't even know what he's saying." Ethan flinched at the sound of his voice. Ms. Brooks' jaw clenched. Or maybe he knows exactly what he's saying. The prosecutor turned sharply toward the judge. "Your Honor, at this time, the state requests to place the defendant in custody. This is a goddamn circus." Holt shouted. The courtroom gasped. It was the first time Holt had lost control. The judge's gaze hardened. "Mr. Holt, sit down before I hold you in contempt of court." But Ethan was somewhere else now. His body rocked back and forth, his mouth slightly open, his eyes glassy, staring at something only he could see, something from that night. And then, his small, broken voice escaped. "He was in my room." A collective shudder ran through the courtroom. Holt froze. Ethan's voice trembled. I woke up, and he was already there." Max let out a low, dangerous growl. The jury members exchanged horrified glances. A woman in the front row of the audience covered her mouth in shock. Ethan's eyes locked onto Holt, as if speaking the words had unlocked something deep inside him. And then, in a whisper that sliced through the room like a blade, he said, "He told me if I made a sound, he'd make me disappear." The courtroom erupted. Gasps. Shouts. Panic. The judge slammed his gavel down over and over, but the chaos was uncontrollable, and Gregory Holt, for the first time, he looked trapped. Because now, there was no way out. The courtroom descended into chaos. Gasps. Shouts. The sound of a woman crying in the gallery. But through it all, Ethan sat frozen in the witness stand, his small fingers gripping Max's fur like a lifeline. "He was in my room. He told me if I made a sound, he'd make me disappear." The words still hung in the air, slicing through the courtroom like a knife. Gregory Holt, the powerful, untouchable businessman, had gone pale. His hands, which were once steady and arrogant, were clenched into fists. His breathing was sharp, erratic. For the first time, everyone saw him for what he really was, not a successful entrepreneur, not a respected community leader, but a monster. The prosecutor stood sharply. "Your Honor, at this time, we are filing for immediate remand. Gregory Holt is a threat to this child and must be taken into custody immediately." Before the judge could respond, Holt slammed his fist against the table. "This is a lie," he bellowed, his voice cracking with rage. "This little brat doesn't even know what he's saying." Ethan flinched, and just like that, Max lunged. The dog's bark shook the room, deep and vicious, his teeth bared in a snarl. He wasn't just barking. He was ready to attack. Two court officers rushed forward, hands on their weapons, their eyes locked on Holt. "Mr. Holt, step back." One of them barked. Holt didn't move, his cold, furious eyes locked onto Ethan. And for one horrifying second, he smirked. It was small, barely noticeable. But Ethan saw it, and Ethan remembered. Something deep inside the boy snapped. "Liar." Ethan screamed so suddenly, so violently, that the entire courtroom went silent. His chest heaved. His small hands clenched into fists. Tears spilled down his face, but there was something new in his eyes now. Fury, defiance, and worst of all for Gregory Holt, Ethan was no longer afraid. The boy stood up from the chair, his voice shaking but powerful. "You hurt my mom. You came into my room. You told me if I screamed, I'd never see her again." The room shook with the weight of his words. Gregory Holt's mask shattered completely. The cool, untouchable businessman was gone. Now, he was just a man backed into a corner. "Enough of this," he roared, his voice desperate, panicked. His eyes flicked wildly to the exits, the guards, the judge. He was looking for a way out. He was going to run. But the second he moved, Max lunged forward. The golden Labrador snapped his jaws just inches from Holt's leg. His growl so deep it vibrated through the floors. Gregory Holt froze in place. And then the two armed court officers grabbed him. "Gregory Holt, you're under arrest." The words rang through the air. Holt thrashed violently, his once perfect suit crumpling as the officers forced his arms behind his back. "Get your hands off me," he screamed. But it was over. The handcuffs clicked. The judge's voice boomed through the courtroom. "Mr. Holt, you are now being charged with the attempted abduction of a minor, in addition to the charges against you." Ethan's small body shook. His hands still clutched Max, his breath uneven. But when he looked up at Holt, for the first time, there was no fear in his eyes. Only relief, and Holt saw it. That's why, as the officers dragged him away, as the courtroom exploded into whispers and gasps, he turned his head one last time, and in a voice low, cruel, and full of quiet venom, he whispered, "This isn't over." Ethan went still. Max growled, and suddenly, the victory didn't feel so complete, because Holt wasn't afraid of prison, and that meant something worse was coming. Gregory Holt was dragged from the courtroom, his wrists bound in cold steel. The entire room buzzed with whispers, gasps, a strange mix of relief and unease. The powerful businessman, the man who thought he could do anything and get away with it, was now just another criminal in handcuffs. Ethan should have felt safe. But he didn't. He sat in the witness stand, his heart hammering against his ribs, his hands still buried in Max's fur. The judge called for a recess, and people started filing out, but Ethan couldn't move. He could still feel Holt's eyes on him. That last whisper, "This isn't over." It crawled under his skin, wrapping around his spine like a snake. What did he mean? Ms. Brooks crouched beside him. "Ethan, sweetheart, you did so good." Her voice was warm, gentle. "He can't hurt you anymore, can't he?" Ethan's lips pressed into a thin line. His mom used to tell him, monsters never really go away. They just hide until they can strike again. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep, even though Holt was in custody, even though Ms. Brooks had reassured him, even though Max was curled up beside him, breathing softly, his warm body pressed against Ethan's legs. Something still felt wrong. Every time Ethan closed his eyes, he saw Holt standing in his bedroom doorway, his shadow stretching across the floor, his breath smelling like cigarettes and something sour. "Make a sound, and I'll make you disappear." Ethan's eyes snapped open. His body was damp with sweat, his heartbeat pounding in his ears, then creaked out a noise. Outside his window, his stomach plummeted. Max's head shot up. His ears perked. A low growl rumbled from his throat. Ethan's entire body locked up, because someone was out there. A dark figure stood just beyond the glass, watching, waiting, and then, before Ethan could move, a gloved hand pressed against the window. A phone screen lit up from the darkness outside. A message flashed across the glass. "You think this is over?" Ethan stopped breathing, because Gregory Holt was supposed to be in jail. Who the hell was standing outside his window? The gloved hand stayed pressed against the window. Ethan couldn't move. Max's growl deepened, his fur bristling. The phone screen in the stranger's hand glowed in the dark, the message still glaring at him like a warning. "You think this is over?" Ethan's heartbeat slammed against his ribs. His fingers gripped the sheets as his mind screamed at him to run, to hide, to do something. Then, the figure moved, not away, closer. Ethan saw the outline of a hooded man standing just outside the glass. The dim streetlights cast shadows over his face, but Ethan could still see his eyes, cold, sharp, familiar. And then it hit him. This wasn't Gregory Holt, but the eyes, the way the man stood, the eerie smirk forming on his lips. He knew Holt. Ethan's stomach dropped. Gregory Holt had never been working alone. There was someone else. A partner, someone still out there. And now, he was standing right outside Ethan's window. Max snapped his jaws, barking wildly, but the figure didn't flinch. Instead, he lifted his free hand, and slowly, he pointed at Ethan, not at the house, not at the window, directly at him. A chill crawled down Ethan's spine. Then, the figure took a step back, another, and in the blink of an eye, he was gone. No running, no noise, just vanished into the night. Ethan gasped, stumbling out of bed and rushing to the window. Nothing. No car. No footprints in the grass. Max was still barking furiously, his tail stiff, his body tense like he was ready to kill. Ethan's breath came out ragged. He turned, grabbing the phone Ms. Brooks had given him, and, with shaking fingers, dialed 911. The operator picked up immediately. 911. "What's your emergency?" Ethan's voice came out hoarse, broken. "He's here." A pause. "Sweetheart," the woman on the other end said carefully. "Who's there?" Ethan's hand tightened around the phone, His voice was barely a whisper. Gregory, Holt's friend.